The beacons and the program that we're rolling out right now with GameStop, it starts with kind of a very active experience when you come in, a welcome notification that also sends a note to the in-store associates. But then there are passive stations set up. But that initial welcome message basically triggers that engagement where the application's already open, so it decreases the latency for the passive actions. So a lot of what we're doing, it's definitely a tool. It's a way to connect physical and digital to where we can really pull through our top-line creative and basically map that to the content or the offers or the utility that's actually going to make the most sense for the consumer, and basically take and convert that intent to some type of action.
Where do you see the challenges are for them when trying to look at it this way? Do you feel like they pick onto it quickly, or where are the roadblocks to getting them to see it from that type of perspective versus, this is really cool, I want to do this?
You know, a lot of it comes down to how can we drive basically partnership and common ground internally. So both across clients and our own internal agency. Integration is a big key for us. You know, being a digitally centric agency where we're trying to infuse digital into everything we do, we have a separate education practice that also educates both internal staff as well as our end clients. So we focus as much on trying to create those points of connection that we possibly can. We look at, my role is strategy, but my partners are in creative. And so we really look at kind of this holistic view to where we have, you know, the planning and the insights, the big idea tied to creative, but yet having that strategic framework to be able to pull it through and mapping it to feasibility and then tying that to results is basically how we approach that soft connection between strategy and creative, where we're both enabling and empowering each other, but at the same time we're not necessarily trying to build our own silos within an organization.
For Beacon specifically, are the pieces that we should be focusing on bringing together to create an effective experience or something that's worthwhile to the consumer?
I think for us, it all started again with the data piece. So it's very important with GameStop specifically. They have a massive loyalty program, millions and millions and millions of active records and active users within that. So it's starting with that piece and really understanding the consumer. Then it's really about understanding basically what's going to motivate that individual. What are the specific genres? What are their patterns in terms of actually purchasing and trading? Trade is a big mechanism of driving the business for GameStop. So that's another key driver for us. So as we begin looking again across data and then what's the content that's going to resonate, what are the specific channels that we're going to deliver that again? Is it a partnership with Facebook? We're doing offline conversion metric planning and mapping to a launch release. Or is it then tying back to some other mechanism that we can drive? You know, it's conversations with Facebook right now around Facebook Place Tips. And is there an opportunity for us with the new Bluetooth beacons where we can basically leverage that in a way to drive more of an external public-facing network that can then drive actual, whether it's app download or some other type of driver back into our native app experience? Like we're testing and looking at and having those conversations as they go. And then ultimately, how does that drive value? One of the key pieces around innovation, it's really about, there's return on investment, but there's also return on innovation. It's proving the incremental steps and value back to the business to warrant additional investment and growing it and driving additional scale. So I think for us, you know, as we look at that kind of initial construct of data, content, channels, and value, that then again translates across all facets of the types of strategies that we'll roll out.
We've been, Tom, you've talked about GameStop a couple of times from a very abstract sense of all the things you're doing from the data in the background. As someone who's on your GameStop membership program, what specifically are you going to be doing to me when I walk into your stores? Can you give me a narrative of how do all these pieces come together from a consumer perspective, from when I walk in the door to when I walk out, and how you're going to be communicating with me later?
Yeah, I can touch on pieces of that, not all of it. Sorry, can't. You know. But
that's just in my FBI file after I'm done,
know.
or
no, it is. It is. No, but the consumer experience starts well before you even go to the store. So whether it's across social, whether it's across the loyalty program, offline, whether it's through email or whatever else whatever the touch point is that you interact with, that's kind of the initial core driver. And obviously, distribution of the application was a big piece of that because it's all predicated on that piece of it. So when you initially walk into one of the Beacon-enabled stores, right now it's in testing, so it's within a separate application, but you could download it now. It's a GTI app. But I partner very closely with Jeff Donaldson, the VP of the GTI, and basically when you walk into the store, it's active. It sends you just a welcome notification. Just basically, here you are. Here are some of the latest deals that are relevant to you on a local level. There are passive zones, about 5 other zones set up within each shop that's basically either broken down by genre or it's broken down by console type, to where you can go then and basically unlock additional content, whether that is game trailers, reviews. The beauty about gaming is there's so much ancillary content. And for us, it's all about the content. It's about non-endemics partnerships. So there are a lot of kind of key places to play from that perspective. And then it's also empowering the consumer while they're there in the store. It's not enough just to serve them an offer. They can potentially, at some point here in the near future, take and deploy that trailer on one of the large displays in the store. So we're trying to create more of an immersive experience within the actual experience, incorporating AR over some of the packaging to further pull out some of that information on an individual product perspective and really leverage the application to its fullest, whether it's through natural marker recognition and pulling up a whole new experience. So beacons are a piece and they're a toolkit as a part of that. But then ultimately when you leave, there's also that whole kind of idea around the employee knowing that you're there, being able to help and assist with you, and there's a whole employee advocacy piece because that's one of the most powerful assets that they have. So at the end of the day, it's about understanding the consumer behavior because ultimately we want to treat each store almost like you do a website. Think about it for a minute. You have so much, you can track traffic, you can track behaviors and all these other kind of elements. Then you begin overlaying that data of the consumer experience passively. You've got purchase data that's associated with that. Then you're understanding how they interact digitally, through some of our other campaigns. So you really start to paint a cohesive picture of that consumer and what triggers really motivate them. So again, it goes back to what I mentioned at the onset. It's not about ubiquity, but it's about really understanding that relevant contextual touch point and understanding the channel that resonates the most with them as an individual.
What are things like beacons changing about the relationship between creatives, technologists, or even the responsibilities and roles of creatives and technologists? And how can we leverage that going forward with either with beacons or with creative ideas?
The roles of technology and strategy and creative, it's all really blurred over the last few years. There used to be very kind of defined silos. Technology owned the website, build out the database associated with that. Strategy was more in line with the planning and the insights piece of that and potentially around the value or optimization of a campaign. And creative was creative. And what we're really seeing is we're seeing this kind of symbiotic relationship occurring where everyone is so dependent upon one another to develop great creative and great campaigns. I think that's the real difference. There's an openness now that I hadn't seen in, I'm a 15-year vet, and I haven't seen that I've seen over the past few years, and just an openness to understand because everyone is, in our agency, it's called the +1. You have to be a +1 in terms of not just your area of expertise, but you have to also be able to pivot and drive some other, whether it's new point of view or new value to yourself or your clients or to your team. So, and that's basically the basis now for how you even excel within the organization. So it's less about dependency on traditional roles and more about how can you actually take and add additional value across your own given field. And so that's one of the ways that we address it.
The first three letters are IoT. It's beacons is part of that. Now, we focus very much on the element of beacons specifically, but there's a lot of other things that can be incorporated here. We've talked about your digital CRM system. Is there anything else within IoT that beacons can integrate with that you guys are excited about that could create some very cool applications in the marketing space?
To me, it's I like to call this the database of you. So, right, you've got the Internet of Things, but in all reality, it's you. You're in the center. You're creating all of those different points of connection throughout all of these various properties, all of these various either sources of data where you're plugging into, whether it's your fitness data, whatever it may be, your predictive marketing messaging coming from your smart refrigerator. Like all of these key pieces are predicated on you and your behaviors. And what's going to happen is your environment, whether it's your car, whether it's your home, wherever you may be, you're that central entity that everything else is going to be interfacing with, interacting with. So when I think of it less as this comprehensive ecosystem. I think about it more, how are consumers going to be traveling through this kind of wave of technology, and all the while they themselves house all of the kind of data that unlock the key for us as marketers. So that's my take on it.
So to me, it seems like that answers more actual activity versus specific data points and acting on a data point.
And I think it depends on the objective. I think there are certain key points in time where the consumer may be, it's a nonlinear journey now. So if a consumer is right there, they've shown intent or they've shown a propensity to buy in the past, and you can use that data to make that purchase decision a little bit easier the next time around. I think that's where that comes into play. But then I also think I look at the Bonnaroo example for example, there are ways then you can create additional utility beyond that are more just either whether it's altruistic or whether it's some other driver, be it awareness or something. But again, it comes back to the objective. It comes back to how we leverage the data, where the consumer is in the kind of that purchase journey, and then how we can basically drive a really just relevant contextual message that meets our end goal. So again, it all comes back to the user. It all comes back to the business goal. And it all comes back to how can we just be as contextually relevant at scale And that's the real key point. When we start talking about beacons and the data, and I made the website analogy earlier, that's where we're looking to try to leverage beacons at scale across some of the programs that we're doing. So it's overlaying that with the data, overlaying that with transactional data, but then ultimately, how can we create personalization at scale? And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. We hear the word personalization thrown around quite a bit, but then how can I then take, and does that mean I have to create 75 pieces of content that are personalized to each individual? Or is it using data to segment individual users and behaviors, similar more to like a BuzzFeed or even a Snapchat, and how they actually drive kind of that association opt-in with content versus real retargeting? So there are different ways you can play with content. There are different ways that you can play with segmentation and contextual relevance, let your audience tell you what works, and then you're able to then be as efficient with your creative dollars, whether that's digitally centric content, short form, whatever it may be, to align that with the overarching goal.
So let's actually dive into that a little bit more. When we talk about beacons, a lot of it seems to be bipolar. One is you send a message to them based on the fact that they're sitting in front of the vitamin aisle. I'm going to push a 50-cent coupon. I think most of the people in this room know that's a bad idea by now. But the other is, well, I know this person intimately based on all their likes and needs, and there's a closed ecosystem. Is there a balance between that? How do I figure out what type of content I should be driving based on the experience and what the beacon specifically can provide in that context?
That's when you hire us.
Simple solution, ladies and gentlemen. What are some of the coolest examples that you've either seen or the coolest theoretical possibilities that you think could actually happen right now?
To me, it's really interesting. We've seen a lot of great work. I know Gimbal's here. I know that they're one of the backbones that's powering kind of the GameStop technology, and obviously the sponsors here from in-market. But I look at where you drive scale from a different perspective. So again, coming back to Facebook rolling out place tips and the impact that can potentially have when you really start connecting digital and social content campaigns to drive a specific offline behavior. So there's one element that's targeting, but there's the other piece that understands kind of the location-aware piece of that and may be able to connect that with more of the native experience. So I'm really interested to see where that goes, how the tests in New York kind of play out, and how that rolls out across. But if you do remember, beacons in Facebook didn't work out as well about 5 or 6 years ago, but I think it's in a different place this time around. So yeah, I would agree with that. I think it really comes down to if you're potentially misusing what they're purported to do. I think that's the really big issue. I think that if you're not leveraging the data in a smart way, if you're not constructing it to where it's potentially active but then drives to passive so you don't have the latency and the issues that were brought up earlier, there are things you have to do when you're structuring your programs to make sure that the user experience is clean and that the data that you're using even to do your segmentation and retargeting of like whether it's targeted content or whatever else it may be, that it actually does resonate. You test that. You test against those specific groups. So I think that the data piece is key, the testing piece is absolutely critical, and just making sure that it's a very clean user experience.